Welcome, comrades. You're listening to The Party Line, a podcast from The Ditch, news and comment from Ireland on theditch.com. I'm Harry Browne.
And I'm Niamh Bhriain, and you can follow The Party Line and spread The Party Line and get on The Ditch WhatsApp feed at ontheditch.com. Today we're joined in studio with Eoghan McNeill from The Ditch.
How are you doing, Eoghan?
Thanks
for coming in. Not so bad, loving the weather.
Great to have you. And we're all loving the weather. Zooming in from upstate New York is our special guest, Jodi Dean. She's the author of numerous great books, professor of political science at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, one of my favorite thinkers and doers, and I know that that's a widely held view within The Ditch as well, on a whole variety of topics that are urgently important for the left today. Today, we're going to concentrate with Jodi on why and how to oppose the push, or should it be the putsch, that is seeing our tech overlords suck our societies dry in the name of a technology that's supposed to be inevitable, the great god AI. So welcome, Jodi Dean.
Welcome, Jodi.
I'm so glad to be talking to you all today. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming in.
So before we get to Jodi, in a few minutes, we're going to talk, as we always do, to Eoghan from The Ditch. And we're going to hear the latest story. So this goes back to the story we've been talking about over the last few weeks, which has been the Peter Thiel event in Wicklow, which has now been cancelled. But we have another revelation of who was on the invite list. So maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, and it's related to what Harry was saying in his introduction there. We carried a story about two senior lawyers from Mason, Hayes and Curran. One of them is actually he is the chairperson of the firm, a guy called Philip Nolan. And then there was Oisin Tobin, who is a senior partner who specializes in tech law. Mm-hmm. Because it was interesting to see and obviously we're going to be talking about tech's expansion into our lives, but in Ireland, tech has expanded into our territory, and mm-hmm. Some people, like myself, would say that Ireland, arguably post-colonial state, we're colonized by foreign capital now, largely in the form of American tech companies. And I've got to say, the two guys who were going to this secret society event run by Peter Thiel, really nice case studies in Irish compradors. Mm-hmm. The people who are, because obviously this colonization, no more than, when Walter Rodney spoke about how Europe had colonized Africa. He wrote about the Africans who facilitated and enabled that and took on the manners and aesthetics of their colonizers. In Ireland, we've got people in the professional services who come up with the tax structures, come up with a suite of tax and accounting advisories to bring these multinationals here. And Mason, Hayes and Curran is a good example of a firm that it's a real significant part of their business. Philip Nolan is actually Facebook's external counsel here in Ireland. The firm also represents people like Adobe, Qualtrics, and other big American multinationals. And when the two guys, when they said that they were going to attend this Peter Thiel event, they had to submit information for their bios. And, the chair, Philip Nolan, he's got a little bit in his bio where he was asked to give an interesting fact about himself. And he did a comparison of Bill Clinton and Mikhail Gorbachev's handshakes. Oh. It's just kind of...
Oh, lucky him. Lucky him. He's shaking hands with both those guys, I take it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And, this week as well, the kind of stuff that really gets to me, Pascal Donoghue tweeted this week about he's on his way to Cairo. And he tweeted a picture about the book he's reading before he goes to Cairo with the World Bank. And it was a book written by a World Bank colleague.
Right.
And it was about Egypt's reform. And,
right.
He said, because Pascal Donoghue is, he's one of our intellects, he's a thinking man.
Right. So Pascal Donoghue is our former finance minister, now gone to a very senior job in the World Bank, and sort of showing his collegiality within this new space. Right?
And, I've got to say, to be clear, I don't really care that he's being paid $600,000 a year. I also
very senior job. Yeah.
Because something like this happens, and it makes for a good headline. People get angry, etc., etc. The extra 10 million that he signed off in Ireland's funding for the World Bank in one of his last acts as finance minister, a little bit on the dodgier side, right? Fine, but like, it's the nature of his work as an Irishman that really gets to me. That he was a finance minister in this arguably post-colonial state, at the absolute whim of foreign capital and American multinationals. The first thing he does for those years of service is to go to the World Bank, and now he's going to Cairo and going and holding up the book of the World Bank colleague and you know, saying, "I'm a good little Paddy," you know.
Yeah.
And to me, I put the tax lawyers like Philip Nolan and Oisin Tobin in that bracket, going to a Peter Thiel event and going, "I shook hands with Bill Clinton." Like,
And of course, and as you say, like, it's the state as much as it is these law firms. I mean, you know, that Pascal Donoghue is a representative of a state that has chosen to facilitate the compradors, the law firms that help them write the tax laws that govern the position of multinational companies here.
And then, of course, whenever an American multinational when they're setting up shop or if they're announcing new jobs, what is it? It's always the IDA. The guys in the IDA get their suit on and they come along for the photo opportunity when... Come on, like it's guys in PwC and KPMG who have brought these guys here.
It's the ones writing the tax documents. Yeah, for sure. We had this with Intel this week. We had a big Intel investment this week, and ministers lining up to take the credit, and bureaucrats lining up to take the credit for that.
And should we expect more revelations of who was on the guest list? We had 2 mentioned last week.
Tanya Harrington. Yeah, we're still working through some of the. You know, it's all of these stories are the result of some great work by a Swedish hacker. So we're working through some of the material, and we'll see how we go.
Brilliant.
Did we get comment from these particular guys? No. All right. Well, look, those are great ditch stories, and as we say, Peter Thiel and his companies are important players in this technological push that we are enduring at the moment. Part 2 of the program, as it always is this week, is a consideration of a piece of non-ditch media. We've just been hearing about what's in the ditch. What's not in the ditch is also something that we look out for. And we decided this week, on account of having Jodi with us, that we would look at a New York Times piece, a piece that appeared on the opinion page by one of the big New York Times thinkers, David Wallace Wells, who often writes about he often writes about climate change, for one thing. That's been one of his special areas. And this big think piece in the New York Times, "Did we make the wrong bet on big AI?" is a kind of a consideration of whether perhaps the structure of the AI industry is not what we expected it to be. But maybe that this unsettled landscape for AI that we're experiencing now, where the likes of Alex Karp from Palantir, of course, Peter Thiel's old company, is kind of critiquing the way that the AI industry is developing. Jodi, I might go to you on this, just in terms of the way that a kind of a big New York Times thinker encourages us to think about AI and its vulnerabilities. What are those vulnerabilities?
Yeah. First, David Wallace Wells is often a really insightful writer. He had a great, in addition to the climate writing that you mentioned, he had a great piece, maybe it was last year or earlier this year, about the way that we don't talk about COVID anymore. And what does that mean? And particularly the connections between COVID and the rise of the right internationally. And so he's really usually pretty insightful. And this piece is just completely the opposite.
Right, okay.
It is one of those pieces that prevents you from thinking, that clouds it, that's just like a bucket of mud and shit right all over us. And so I think so then you have to kind of weed out and find like what else is in that bucket. So the first part that I find like really maddening is the kind of buying into AI inevitability.
Yes.
Right. But then when you read the piece, seems like a little shook, like, oh no, AI is inevitable. We. I'm like, who's the we? What do you mean? I'm not in your we. But
I didn't make any bet on big AI at all, actually, myself.
I didn't make any bet. I don't even have any money to put in a bed. And this thing, it acts like it was a choice instead of being something that's been forced down our throats that nobody asked for. So we've got this kind of, oh, everyone chose AI and now maybe we were deceived. So there's a kind of ridiculously inclusive we. There's an assumption of inevitability. And both of those things, like those are a little bit rupturing to him, seem to be occasioning this so-called think piece. Now, to read it also as maybe more illuminating than I'm giving it credit for being. What we see in there is rupture in among the tech lords. Right? They
Exactly.
don't agree with each other.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like there's even a unified capitalist class about this stuff. They are disagreeing on who's going to get the goods, or how will they capture value, who will capture it, what are the mechanisms for that, who's going to be empowered and who's not. And so the Matt Karp's rant, that is the occasion for Wallace Wells's piece, is kind of a nice little window into the division within the capitalist class. So that's what I think is interesting in the piece.
Yes.
In addition to poor Wallace Wells, just like, oh my God, I was a believer and now I feel a little bit disenchanted.
Yes, we have growing questions about the way those big AI labs have sold the rest of us on their paths to global domination. But the relevant question is being asked by Karp, not by Jodi Dean. That in effect that the limits on the debate about AI are limits that are essentially set by the big industrial players within it, and whether there really is a race between a bunch of American companies, one of whom is going to emerge as the acknowledged monolith in this area, and maybe that instead we've got a more unsettled and a more diverse marketplace, as it were. And in a sense, that conclusion that maybe we have a more unsettled and a diverse marketplace is a kind of from a strictly free market capitalist point of view is kind of almost optimistic. That we're going to see a true, fight to the finish between all sorts of different kinds of players and all sorts of different kinds of models, but one that takes it for granted that AI is inevitable. That we're not necessarily going to see a singular convergence, and I'll read directly from Wallace Wells' piece. As we move further into the AI future, it no longer looks so clear that we are heading toward convergence, like we used to read about in science fiction. Instead, what we have is a more unsettled landscape, which some have called decentralized and democratic, and others simply more competitive. All those words, I think, kind of like positive buzzwords in the world of kind of a liberal New York Times audience,
Yeah, I like the passage that you brought out because it lets us see how they're, members of the ruling class, or at least, writers for the ruling class, who are still using a language that blends together capitalism and democracy
Yes.
as if they were compatible, right? As if cutthroat market competition is the same thing as a kind of democratic pluralism participation where everyone is somehow magically involved in the realization of a future that we all know is going to benefit a few of the tech lords and make sort of neo-serfs out of the rest of us.
I just on a few things that you said, Jodi. So I read it before I came in earlier this morning, and I'll admit I had to read it a few times before I could understand it. So I'm actually glad that you said that it kind of prevents thinking or clouds thinking, because and also the kind of the question of who's the we, because I would honestly I would imagine that if I couldn't understand it after reading it a number of times, it assumes that we already have so much prior knowledge about this whole theme. And it's very in the weeds. And I'm just not even really sure who the audience is that they're trying to get to besides their own bubble. And kind of, I just think as a news outlet that's writing for a broad public, does the broad public even understand this and what it's trying to say? I don't know.
I think your mentioning bubble is so smart because it pushes us to think about how the bubble is not just the financial and investment bubble, but it's a bubble of thinking and people and personalities, and the rest of us are outside of it, right? Like, you know, in the game language, we're non-player characters. Like, we don't register at all. And so it's a piece probably for, I don't know, 20 or 30,000 people in the world, the finance sector, the heads of big tech, and the rest of us don't even matter. I mean, you're really right. The insidery suppositions of the piece are glaring, and that it's published in, you know, the paper of record in the United States really makes markedly visible how much most of us are actually completely outside of this bubble that is determining or trying to determine or telling us that it's determining our futures.
We'll get to all that telling, but just to double down on that point that we've made about the risk, I'll just read another passage here. The draft internal analysis prepared by Treasury Department analysts has reportedly warned that the size of the big AI companies represents a systemic risk to the country's economic and financial system. And I suspect that's not only the country, the United States, but probably some other countries as well. But that, as you say, we are somehow, even though we're obviously caught up in any system, we're all caught up in any systemic risk, we're still outside of the kind of the structure of decision making and of thinking that establishes the parameters for that risk. And that the big AI labs may be less central to the future than they've seemed to date. But we do know, somehow we know, Jodi, that AI is the future. And I want to get into that with you because you've been writing a lot about AI lately. For those people who are familiar with your work, it's kind of a new turn that you've taken relatively recently.
Yeah, so back in the late 90s through early 2000s, I was writing under the heading of communicative capitalism about networked digital media. And towards the end of that kind of research trajectory, I wrote a few things about sort of big data and the app economy, but I mean, those appeared in like obscure places. And then I moved to write 3 or 4 books related to communism. And so now I've been returning to, you know, basically to tech and communication and thinking about that. So I have this Substack, which is, it's really, like, I think I say somewhere on it, like, there's no reason to subscribe to this. I'm just working. This is like what I'm reading, stuff I'm trying to work out.
No paywalls at all, right? No
Yeah,
paywalls.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but the reason I started doing this is I was feeling like I had not come across smart, compelling, clear analysis on the left about AI. And I think in part, it's just like I hadn't located it yet, but it hadn't been, you know, it dispersed very much. It seems like it had been sort of channeled, and now I'm starting to see more of it. But I was really worried about like where is a good left analysis, and and I was worrying about this in particular because it seems like with the AI is that the whole AI discourse includes its own criticism in ways that block other kinds of criticism, right?
Yes.
So all of the worst predictions about AI come from AI insiders.
Yes.
Which is just completely bizarre, right? I mean, if we really think about it, it's like, oh, hey, world, we're creating something that may make all humans extinct, but that's the way it goes. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really a strange phenomenon. And so this is one of the things that started, I started compelling me to try to start to read more, think more, and try to, start putting together some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, the Wallace Wells piece is kind of exemplary in this regard of finding the debate within the tech sector as being the relevant debate about AI. That and in effect, as you suggest, you know, that some of what passes for debate is really a kind of a way of saying, hey, we're the big guys now. We're in charge. You know, we may be taking you to hell, but we're the only drivers you got. You know, and that the debate, in other words, is kind of a form of marketing and of assertion of power and primacy.
Oh, totally, right? Like their debate is a way of, I think, trying to mark and reinforce whether or not it's intentional or sort of intentional, or just an emergent future. It marks the powerlessness of the majority of people. It marks the absolute end of anything that had once been celebrated as democracy or participatory democracy, where they don't even bother legitimating it, right? Or they can say, hypothetically, it might be good, but it'll wipe out half of the jobs. It's going to it can become, it can, empower bad actors. It can put terrible hands in the hands of all sorts of criminal organizations that can unleash bioterrorism and nuclear war and destroy all of our data and so on and so on. Like every possible thing that one could imagine, they've already brought up and saying, but yet it's inevitable that we make it. And you, little people, you can do nothing about it. Like it's really like a giant demonstration of the power of a tech elite over the rest of us. And I'd say it's the end of anything like political legitimacy. That's, to me, there's like that kind of parallel between the rising authoritarianism or sort of fascism of Trump and the tech sector. It's not just that they help each other's interest, it's that they both have this performance of everyone else's lack of power at the heart of what they're doing. And that's one of the huge, I think, political effects of the kind of myth around AI is you can do nothing about it. This is inevitable. We can force this down your throats for good or ill. Some of us will get very, very rich, and the rest of you will become a permanent underclass.
Maybe that's a good way to segue into the piece, the most recent Substack piece that you wrote about AI and the three disavowals. And maybe, just some of the stuff that you've mentioned just now about kind of the hypothetical future. Whereas when I read the Substack piece before coming in, I think the most important piece in it is the kind of the call or the warning that we would focus on the present and not this kind of hypothetical future. So maybe you can talk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, so a lot of what I write comes out of my experiences as involved in left politics and left political discussions, and then I'm trying to talk about some of the things in kind of a more abstract and general way. And so this is one of them, and it's one of the ways that it becomes very difficult to organize against AI broadly, right? We see the massive and wonderful data center build out. I mean, build out of the data center opposition, which is really great. And but it's been interesting how that has taken shape primarily, not exclusively, but primarily as an environmental and ecological issue, like communities worried about the harm to their community of the data centers and also the issues around noise and water and electricity. And so I've been concerned about where's the more communist analysis? Where is the more analysis that's coming out of Marxist suppositions? And one of the things that I've found happening in many discussions is immediate projection into a future. Well, it's possible that AI can bring in the socialist future, and AI will let us do all of the planning we need to do, and AI is going to let us have more leisure time. AI will solve every political problem that we have after the revolution in our glorious socialist future. And it's just like, wait a minute, what about what's happening here and now? One, and two, isn't it the case that this positing of some kind of glorious future that AI enables is the exact same move that we see among the tech optimists, right? They've got boomers and doomers, and like their tech optimists promise all of the goodies. They just also tend to couple it with, it could go terribly wrong, but it could be in a future of abundance. So my first I think it's got to be like a methodological and political principle is that we need to focus on what is happening now, here, focus on the present, and not let hypotheticals take us away. Like one line, I feel extremely like intense about this issue in part because, Marxist analysis is historical materialism, not futurist materialism. And yet what goes on in too many discussions is our possible future.
So that idea that AI invites us to speculate, whether we're doing so as kind of libertarian optimists, as dystopian pessimists, or as socialist futurists, we're always stuck in the future, as it were, with AI. It's always something that's around the bend.
And also that there's no future. That's also mentioned in the piece. It's both. It both puts us into the future, but also that there's no future.
Yeah. So this is the one of the interesting kinds of paradoxes of this. I like your expression, Harry, of like stuck in the future, right? Like of being stuck there. It's like on the one hand, there's no future because we can't affect it, right? The tech lords are producing it, and there's nothing that we can do about it. We're just going to be doomed to be a permanent underclass. But the other part is like it's easy to see why many of us on the left want to find something for people to fight for, right? We want to be able to offer a positive vision because it seems that we've almost reached the limits of critique, right? Everybody knows that conditions of work suck, that cost of living is insane, that we can't find affordable housing, that climate change is going faster and faster, that things are getting worse. And yet we feel like there's nothing we can do about it. There's this lack of capacity. And so it's not like the problem is people are deluded and need to be woken up to the horrible realities of the present. The problem is that people need to feel like they can shape it. And so I can see why people, particularly left organizers, might want to have a positive message around AI to give people something to hope for. But that, in my mind, is exactly the wrong thing to do. Right? The positive message has to come from we win by building our collective power, by connecting with one another, by building human capacity and human connections and human intelligence, not by continuing to offload capacities into the machines.
We'll come back to that question of what capacities the machines might have and why we might still want to resist that. But let's work through those disavowals that Niamh introduced from your most recent piece. So we've talked about that kind of disavowal of the present. You also talk about the disavowal of work and workers. So this is the idea that AI is essentially going to replace labor and is indeed doing so already.
Yeah, I think one way we can approach this is as an initial pass is just the very language of artificial intelligence displaces away from the human intelligence of workers in any space. It's like intelligence becomes the property of a set of algorithms, a set of programs, a particular technology, and not something that's held by workers. And so it's like it's just from the very beginning, like to say like, oh, we need to put AI into the workplace to do X, Y, and Z, like improve efficiency, etc., presumes that actual workers aren't doing this, can't do this, and need this kind of extra augmentation. So there's from the very get-go a separation of intelligence from the worker. Then more fundamentally, one of the things we see with this sort of disavowal of work and the worker in artificial intelligence is something that Matteo Pasquinelli has looked at really beautifully in his book, The Eye of the Master, following earlier work from the 70s from Harry Braverman on labor and monopoly capital, where both of them are reading this early industrialist Babbage, who Marx used a bunch for thinking about the division of labor. And what they point out is how technologies are based in, ultimately, first machinery, and then we might say AI, are based initially in the division of labor. There are different kinds of modeling, mapping, envisioning of the division of labor. And that's one of the things that we see in AI, is it is a kind of instantiation of a particular division of labor that involves separating workers actually from their own knowledge.
Right.
Let me give one other sort of concrete example. One of the weird things right now, or say, the last year and a half, is that enterprises or firms, invest in AI, and then they tell their workers, okay, you need to use it. Find ways to use this. You need to figure out how you can use it. So workers are being told, and many of these are office workers, not always, can be different kinds of workers, are being told, hey, figure out which tasks that you do can be automated. Basically, that you can offload, then sotto voce, and then we can offload you, or we can manage you better in controlling what you do when you do these tasks. So workers are being invited to essentially, make the rope that will hang them. They're being invited to envision their tasks according to the dictates of AI, according to the dictates of the kind of predictive program that will automate it away. So I think that this is one of these ways that actual workers are pushed aside in favor of this artificial vision of work as a set of discrete tasks, which again comes out of the division of labor.
Before we get onto the third disavowal, what you've just said there makes me think I want to go back to typical great Jodi Dean kind of headline writing and phrase making that you did from the very first that you took on this topic on your Substack a few weeks ago. AI is capital, right? So in what sense, what does it mean to say AI is capital? What does it mean in terms of the, definitionally, and what does it mean in terms of how we respond to it?
So first and foremost, it tells us that AI is a set of relations. It's a set of class relations, and it's a site of struggle, right? So I think we've got to think about AI not in terms of, oh, it's cognizant machines. It's like, or what is it? One of the Demis Hassibas said yesterday, we've made sand think, or 2 days ago, right? It's not thinking sand, right? No, this is capital. And there's, as soon as you say that, particularly as Marxists and as communists, then a zillion things open up for us. And there's an automatic demystification, right? Like, no, no, no. This is capital. This is a set of class relations. It's a set of struggle. It is the way that a class of owners is trying to increase their ability to accumulate and decrease that ability for the rest of us. It is a set of fixed capital, right? Moving away from living labor or variable capital of workers and concentrating power into the hands of the owners of the machines. I mean, and Sam Altman said this directly. He said this several years ago. Oh yeah, what AI does is shift the balance of power in the favor of capital, and so this is going to be an issue we'll have to deal with. Like again, that kind of bizarre we that they use. But I need to give, at the risk of over personalization, but sometimes it can help make the stories realer. I have to say that this AI is capital first came to me from my son. My son's a machine learning engineer for a company. And like, so he designs these kinds of models, and he's my primary informant. And he, I don't understand a lot of everything that he says because he's really, he does this. This is his research and professional area. But so that's the first thing. It comes from my son. Now, how come? Well, because I was starting to think more about it, I felt like I need to actually know what I'm talking about. And so I had to use some AI and experiment and see what's going on. I did this back in my communicative capitalist days where it's like, okay, I can't criticize this, say blogs or blog world if I don't know what it's like. Like I can't write and critique Twitter or X if I don't know what these things are like and what it feels like. So I tried to use in different sort of experimental ways, not as like a writing help or even as a research help, but more like a kind of observation study. And so I used one of these features to look at things in a room and try to change it out and get advice, okay, and see what is that, does this work? And the doggone ChatGPT would give me really sincere, well thought, detailed advice and proving why one arrangement of furniture was absolutely necessary. And then a week later, tell me the exact opposite. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I said something to it. I'm like, you're telling me the exact opposite. And then it doubled down And it's like, no, I didn't. These are both blah blah. And then it's like it was just completely weird. And then I tell this to my son. I'm like, I can't believe this. What's going on? He's like, AI is capital. He's like, when you are talking to the stupid thing, you are talking to capital. That's it. That's the only thing. You are talking to capital. You are not talking to a designer. You are not talking to a person. And then I started extrapolating, right? And people are not talking to a real boyfriend or girlfriend or a therapist, right? They're talking to capital. That means they're talking to a set of relations that are designed to empower a concentration of capital in the hands of the few and just take whatever information or activity that their engagement generates and use that for the accumulation strategies of the wealthy. That's all it is. And this became a really important thing for me to thinking that through. It became a real like, yes, that's right. And I'll also say, like I get the impression that everyone else he works with, they don't think about the models in any way as like partners or intelligences or co-workers. Not at all. They're tools. Right? They're tools. And then like any kinds of tools, you think about what do they do to the labor process?
So the last disavowal, as it were, as we've talked about, of the present of work and workers, the last one is of choice, uncertainty, and politics. So this brings us to inevitability, the question of inevitability and why inevitability needs to be resisted and central to our struggle over AI. What do you mean when you say inevitability, especially in the context of something like this article in the New York Times, which has, on the one hand, a sense of inevitability, and on the other hand, a sense of the unsettled nature of the evolution of the field?
It's almost like Wallace Wells was unsettled because the conflict, sort of the conflict within the tech lords or the ruling class, is unsettling the prior belief in inevitability. And it was supposed to be that this was a certain path, and now it's less certain. And that's, that can make somebody nervous. I think that that's part of it. But I also think that inevitability is offered to prevent us from thinking about the churn, from seeing the disagreements, from acknowledging the fact that nothing is certain, that anything can fall apart at any moment. Like they don't want us to see that, right? They really don't. And why? Because then the money stops, the investment money stops going in. And when the investment money stops going in, then they can't keep developing it. I mean, it's if you go back and start looking at the writings, even 10, 15 years ago, nobody was saying this stuff was inevitable, right? They're looking at different ways of developing. I mean, there's a tech and scientific discussion, but it wasn't about this as being inevitable. It was more like any research area. Can we do this? What can happen? What can we, it's just all of the kind of experimentation in development. But the rhetoric of inevitable is what drives the money, and also I think depoliticizes people. And when it's unstable, that opens up possibilities of politicization, and then opens up the space really for real struggle. And I would say, like, what's exciting is the struggle can be not just around data centers, not just around AI, but around capitalist more broadly.
Maybe we should just mention a little bit the struggle on data centres. Just in the context of Ireland, we had a minister recently, the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, Peter Burke, and he said that data centres were a strategic opportunity for the Irish economy. And you probably know that Ireland was referenced recently in a UN report where it described Ireland as a cautionary tale in terms of the expansion of data centres. I think the most recent count is that we have 107 data centres and they use almost a quarter of our electricity grid. We're not sure, there's no available figures for how much water they use, but we're sure that it's very heavy.
Yeah, it's plenty, and as the weather gets hotter, it's more.
At the moment, we're in the middle of a heat wave in Ireland where we've had record high temperatures for, over a week. We're up at 29, 30 degrees, which is unheard of for Ireland. And there's now a water pipe or a water hose ban in place for a number of counties. For the next 6 weeks, people can't water their gardens or whatever. But data centre water usage has not been cut. So the discussion around data centres is back in the news again, also because we had a moratorium on the expansion of data centres that was lifted. We had a ban on the importation of fracked gas, and that's been lifted. So now we can import LNG to build LNG terminals, which will then be used to supply data centres going down the line, which is most likely the strategic opportunity that the minister is talking about. So I suppose in Ireland, the data centre question, people are probably not thinking as broadly if we've had the discussion here today, but the data centre question is very relevant, and it's tied very much to the kind of the LNG stuff which is going on at the moment. And just at the moment, the very real situation that people can't turn on their taps. So in some places they have a complete restriction where there's no water overnight, but there's no discussion about the amount of water that's been pumped into data centres.
And of course, like the incredible the price of energy in Ireland being extremely high by European standards as well. So it's all tied in. We haven't seen maybe as much of the community-based resistance to individual data centers that you've seen in the United States. I think it's been a more generalized kind of critique here rather than kind of local, stopping tractors and things like that you've seen. But you've been talking about how to connect the targeting of data centers, politically, community-based or otherwise, with this wider political question.
Yeah, a few things. One, what Niamh was describing in Ireland is very similar to what's been happening in New York State, and that's this connection between the former struggles against fracking and the struggles against data centers. In my area, in almost the exact same networks of people who are really involved in getting a ban on fracking have been mobilized around getting a data center moratorium. And we've been actually in New York State, the governor just announced one 1 or 2 days ago. So there's a year-long moratorium. It's the first state-level ban in the U.S. It's not as strong as a piece of legislation that was passed, but our governor hasn't signed or not signed that yet, so we don't know if that will go through. But it's it's really important work, and it's bubbled up from the efforts of local struggles, and then trying to find the different places into how do you actually stop these things. And so a lot of it is, one of the things that it's sort of like, to be kind of crude, it's like not the most fun kind of struggle to be involved in, because lots of it are getting in the weeds on local zoning board discussions. And you have to do these very small things, like see how long is the approval process? What is the data going in? And so it really requires a meticulous skill set of reading documents and a great deal of patience for local political meetings where everybody begins the meeting by talking about how long they've lived in the community and where their kids went to high school. And so it's kind of charming on the one hand, but it's also really granular step-by-step work, but we're seeing real payoffs of it. So that I think is useful and inspiring. And we're seeing it because it goes across party lines, right? It's one of the very few issues in the United States where there is not a right-left divide. What's appearing is the class divide. The people forcing AI down our throats, the people forcing the building of data centers are multi-million-dollar and billionaire tech lords, right? They are a class of people trying to force things down the throats of the rest of us. So this is what's interesting about how it's building out as a class struggle, rather than just an environmental struggle, because of who's forcing it and who's resisting it. So I think that addresses the point you're bringing up, Harry. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I want to follow that up because I've just been in the States myself, and one of the things that I noticed that also to some extent doesn't go along a left-right divide is the attitude towards imperialism and towards the war, which is now being renewed, the war against Iran. So I wanted to, first of all, maybe get your impression on that observation, but also where imperialism fits into this discussion
Yeah.
about AI.
Um, so with respect to the Iran war part, it seems to me that that's a little more muted on a popular level than the kind of unity against data centers. But you are seeing this among some Republican influencers and media figures who are correctly pointing out that Trump had won on ending these forever wars, and that part of his MAGA message was America first means that we're not engaged in these stupid wars that have basically no benefit for the US. And so it doesn't strike me as like a kind of, I don't know, real anti-imperialism as much as it is on the right a kind of nativism. On the left, it's deeply interconnected with the building of an anti-imperialist movement around solidarity with Palestine in the wake of the U.S.-Israeli genocide, and that part has been strong, and that's moved into the mainstream. We just saw a large number, I think it was a majority or strong minority of members of Democratic members of the U.S. Congress vote to stop funding to Israel, which is an amazing thing to happen. I mean, it's just shocking. It wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. So that part of the anti-imperialism struggle is alive. But to connect it with AI, here's the thing that sort of is worrisome to me, and that is, Bernie Sanders has proposed this kind of sovereign wealth fund where the funding for it would come out of the nationalization of the big tech firms, and there would be something like 50% of their proceeds go into a fund that protect that benefit people in the United States, that benefit U.S. citizens. Well, I mean, in the same breath, Sanders and the people around him will say AI has been built on the collective knowledge of humanity, but now the proceeds become the benefit of U.S. citizens, and that imperialist move is utterly obscured, right? That way that it's obscured by a kind of good-hearted social democratic. It belongs in the hands of the workers, but then it's like, well, which workers we actually really mean? U.S. workers, and everybody else is completely, invisible, and they don't appear. So I think that's a big part. And then another part on the ideological level is the justification for AI. And this has been going on for a while. You saw this already in the Obama administration with Google's Eric Schmidt was part of a major advisory task force. And the argument has been AI is inevitable. If the US, doesn't get there first, China will, and whoever gets there first is going to control the world. And this part is, I mean, obviously just sort of naked, gross imperialism. U.S. military power requires us getting there first. And then it means building something that other countries then have to make a choice about. Are you going to follow the US, or will you follow China, or will you try to have some kind of AI sovereignty, which incidentally is a Palantir slogan, marketing slogan, rather than having anything to do with the actual sovereignty of actual other countries. So I think the imperialist dimensions of this are really quite vast.
And we've seen, of course, AI being used very heavily in Israeli military actions and in American ones as well. I mean, we've been given to understand that the initial bombing of the girls' school in Iran resulted from AI targeting, and perhaps an error of AI targeting, although that's certainly up for debate. But the military application of AI has been very much in our faces in recent times.
Yeah, and the like with the school, you get the AI starts to function as like another version of the dog ate my homework, right? Well,
Yeah.
we're not responsible for killing all of those folks. That the computer did it.
I wanted to ask about the kind of people on the left and elsewhere, ordinary people who would say, yeah, but, AI really does help a lot when I need to do this, when I ask it to do that, when, and I know that supposedly medical diagnosis is going to be improved by AI. There's a whole world of data crunching. Not just large language models, but data crunching beyond the language models that we might see, as you suggested earlier, as part of some kind of socialist future or any kind of slightly better future than the one that we have. How do you answer for the kind of, some development of AI is surely helpful, necessary, and even hopeful for society at large?
I think that one of the first ways to start engaging that question is to try to say, what problems are we addressing? What issues are we trying to talk about? And so let's be, if we're thinking about healthcare, if we talk to nurses, I'm wondering, how many nurses think that their problems will be solved by more AI rather than more nurses? Right? Wouldn't it be the case that, in fact, if we had more humans involved in care, then a lot of the problems that are sort of offloaded onto technological solutions would go away. So I think the first pass is to think about what is the labor process, what are the conditions of work, what are the problems we're trying to solve. So for office workers, it's like, and David Graeber, of course, was really important on this to make us thinking about the conditions of bullshit jobs, right? So it's like the neoliberal arrangement of our work over the last 40 years has made work grosser and more boring and more trivial, less creative, not fun, so stupid. And so something that promises a little bit of relief is something we might quickly grasp for. But are we grasping for, is that a real solution, or is it like a technological fix? Right? It strikes me as that it's a technological fix that furthers our disempowerment and alienation rather than solves it. And one example would be the stupid ass automated AI emails now. Like, I get 2 or 3 emails a day from an AI offering to publicize my books. And it has read my this, that, or that book so closely and wants to do all of this and stuff. And I'm like, what the hell is this? So, but the thing is that the AI feature then on my Microsoft program gives me the summary of it. So I don't have to read it. And so it's an AI writing a message to another AI, but still increases the slop in my inbox. So this is one of the experiences, I think, that's sort of indicative of how what might feel like a bit of a relief for us is actually not, it's making the problem worse. So the first thing that has to do is to get rid of the, don't you want to cure cancer? And to zoom out a little bit to think about larger processes rather than this sort of one emotional example.
I think we've come up to the hour almost.
We have.
So.
Jodi, thank you so much for your time and for your extremely interesting contribution today. We really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, thanks a million, Jodi. And thanks, Eoghan, for coming in.
We'll call it a podcast.
It's been really great talking with you all. Thanks.
And donate, subscribe. Not you, Jodi, but listeners and viewers should donate and subscribe at ontheditch.com. Get on the Ditch WhatsApp feed and follow the party line. Thanks, Jodi Dean. Thanks, Niamh. Thanks, Eoghan.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.